Is this thing on?
Are you ready, Matt?
You're listening to Box Office Bingers
with Matt Diaz and Ernesto Santos.
Good evening, folks. We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you.
We know each other. He's a friend from work.
Box Office Bingers.
And the only way that I know how to do it is to find you a bloody good dump.
He's my friend. I don't have friends. I got family.
I can do this all day.
You know, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Let's talk about The Mandalorian. Mandalorian Season 2. We have all been... I think Scott and I have been watching it week to week, and Ernesto saw everything all at once. So, Ernesto, I'll kick it off to you first. What were your thoughts on The Mandalorian after you just saw it?
Well, to be honest, I really enjoyed it. I felt like there were certain points in Season 1 where I felt there were some lulls, not necessarily lulls, but where there wasn't a lot happening within the story. But
and you're wrong.
But then this season, I felt like it was one after another. There was just shit going off left and right. I thought it was great. All the opening fight scenes were great. Bryce Dallas Howard directed episode 3. I thought that was pretty interesting. I guess she's going to be those 3 Mandalores. Are they the Rangers? Is that the Rangers of the Old Republic? Is that other show that got announced? Is that who they are? There were 2 shows. There were 3. There was the Boba Fett, Ahsoka show, and then there was another one, Rangers of the Old Republic.
I don't think so.
It's called... Yes, there is the 3rd show that's going to be taking place in this. I forgot the name of it, but yeah, I believe it's the Rangers of the Republic, something along those lines.
I thought that was about the X-Wing squadrons and whatnot.
Maybe.
The guys that kept showing up, the Mandalorians that were sort of like cops that deputized. What was the female character's name? Played by Carano.
Her name is
Bo-Katan?
Cara Dune. Cara Dune.
Cara Dune, right.
Cara Dune might be involved in that new Rangers of the Republic series, but the Mandalorian stuff, I think it's going to stay with the Mandalorian, or maybe kind of dive into Boba Fett, maybe kind of balance between the two.
Yeah, because they were legit Mandalorians, from the animated series, the Clone Wars.
Okay.
They showed up there a lot, especially Bo-Katan. And she wants that darksaber so bad she can't see straight.
I saw that. Do they talk about her? Does she shows up in Clone Wars? They explain all that?
Yeah. So in the Clone Wars, you kind of get her. I guess for the most part, for you be watching her story backwards, because you're kind of seeing her at post Clone Wars, obviously, because this takes place before A New Hope, but before before A New Hope. And
no.
So
I'm
sorry. No, I'm sorry. It's after. It's 10 years after
Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Dude,
So
me and Ernesto are the ones drinking. What is your excuse?
Yeah, seriously. I was like, whoa, Matthew.
Yeah. Way down the line.
Yeah.
So
water. Okay.
Yeah. But so last time you see her in the Clone Wars, there's a lot of time has passed. So you got to see kind of that build up to that, and then when you're watching The Mandalorians, many years later, you see her doing this and trying to get the Darksaber as we saw throughout the series.
Ah, okay. And you got Dave Filoni writing and directing episode 5, the Ahsoka episode, which I thought was really well. I thought that was a perfect backdoor pilot for her. They gave her just enough time. She served purpose to the story of the Mandalorian. It wasn't shoehorned in there just to get everybody to see her character. You know what I mean? It served its purpose. It worked. I thought she was great on screen. I am curious what they're gonna do with Grogu. Are we ever gonna see him again? At the very end of the series, he goes off with Luke Skywalker. Does he just get destroyed when Kylo, when their whole camp gets destroyed? Does he dive in? Does he leave and go somewhere else? I don't know. They sent him with Luke Skywalker, and I feel like I had more questions than before he got there. Like I just have
One.
I have so many questions.
Yeah. Well, like, and it's on that note where you ask, okay, what happens, he's with Luke now, but then what happens when Luke got Kylo Ren? Well, I guess you can't really call him, in this aspect, you can't call him Kylo Ren. You got to call him whatever his regular name was.
Ben Solo.
Ben,
Yeah.
okay.
Ben Solo, yeah.
Yeah, because Kylo Ren's a stupid name. Anyway, dude, anything that you can shrink down, like as a nickname is like, oh shit, it's Kyle. Oh crap, it's not even like Darth Kyle. It's not gonna work. It's just stupid. Anyway, so whenever he picks up Grogu, when Luke picks up Grogu, Ben doesn't exist yet.
Correct.
Presumably, I don't know. In the what's now considered the Legends series of all the old Star Wars lore, all the books that came out. Mm-hmm. It was years after Return of the Jedi before Han and Leia got married, much less had kids, which was years later. And so it was twins first and then followed by a single kid, which was Ben Solo later. Mm. So presumably in this specific timeline, there's Grogu, Luke gets Grogu. Okay, fine. It's possible Han and Leia aren't married yet, much less has a kid old enough to begin training.
Right.
So.
Or if Luke's even going to train him.
Do what?
Do we know if Luke is going to train him, or maybe is he going to
train Grogu?
Yeah, or is he going to take someone? Or
presumably,
is he take someone to go train him? Well, he does open the school, I guess. So I guess he does.
Well, but does he? I mean, what do you mean by he opens a school? I mean, there was one from the movies in this specific storyline that is now canon. There's Luke and there's Ben.
Oh, that's right.
And that goes to shit completely, as we all saw. So, I guess you've got, if they decided to go that way, you've got a lot of years that Luke could spend with Grogu before Ben Solo shows up.
Yeah.
So there's lots of questions, because at that point, how long does Grogu take to not become childlike anymore? How long before he can actually speak and communicate?
Years have gone by. Yeah, it took him 50 years just now, so it could take him a lot longer to even work, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, Yoda was 900. So.
Right. That's a good point. So I mean, he's still in infancy, so that a lot of time would have to pass, for him to be somewhat.
Yeah. I would say, were you surprised that Luke Skywalker kind of came in the fold? Because a lot of people didn't think he was going to come into the show, and I was one of them. Like,
Same
there's no
here.
way you're going to bring him in here.
Yeah, but and I felt like it was great, but I feel like it needs to have a purpose, because you could have easily just put him with, you could have introduced a whole new Jedi person to come into the, you could have went a whole other route. Well, another cool route you could have probably done is taken the character from the video game, from Fallen Order, because he sets up his own little Jedi Order, but that's pre New Hope. That's after post Rogue One, in between Rogue One and New Hope. So I mean, they could have done that too.
Wait, how are you going to be? Quick question: how are you going to be between Rogue One and New Hope when they butted up again? There was zero time between. Those
you know what
movies.
I mean? It's in that time frame.
Okay, I got you. I got you.
Yeah, it's in that time frame.
Okay, in that particular instance, I wasn't trying to be funny. That was me not understanding what you said.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But because you're right. They literally go right into the other.
Yeah, but I think I was I was very surprised for having to be Luke Skywalker to appear. But there were a lot of speculations that, the guy from the video game could have showed up. Somebody from Rebels could have shown up because I guess there's still Jedis that are still alive in that series because that took place between 3 and 4. So they could have introduced a lot of people, but for them to like showcase Luke Skywalker for me was a huge surprise. Like, and you kind of felt it like when you saw the X-wing on the outside. You're like, oh, who's that? And you're like, nah, that can't be him. There's no way you're gonna include him. And then it kind of it got solidified when they brought the green lightsaber. I'm like, no way, okay.
Yeah,
we did that.
When the X-wing came in, I'm like, because I was still thinking, such a big deal was made out of Ahsoka showing up, and she was in for one episode. I was thinking Ahsoka shows up, and so when this X-wing shows up, I'm thinking, does Ahsoka have an X-wing?
Yeah.
And then you see this cloaked figure, and the first time that you see a lightsaber, it's black and white, security video.
Right.
And I'm like, well, okay, if we see 2 lightsabers, that's definitely Ahsoka because that's her thing. Right. And then only one shows up, but it's black and white. Like, well, maybe she's just not using both. And then it's green. Uh-oh. No, they didn't. And then you're just waiting. You have, I don't know if, I can't speak to how y'all felt about it. For me personally, and I feel like maybe this was a widespread thing, was you kept going, no, they're not. Could they? Did they? They wouldn't dare. They would have had to, de-age the shit out of Mark Hamill. Holy cow. Basically, you're just going to get his voice. And not even that, because his voice now is nothing like the Luke Skywalker voice from back then.
Yeah.
And so it's like, no, are they? It is. Holy, how are they doing this? What's it going to look like? And then he went, I've seen memes making the comparison of, Luke Skywalker fighting these things was similar to Darth Vader at the end of Rogue One fighting the hallway full of troopers. Yep. Just cutting his way through everything with zero problem. Yeah. And then sure enough, holy crap, it's Luke. And then boom, R2 shows up as well. Of course R2's there.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he be?
Yeah.
Just to pull on your heartstrings a little bit more, or your level of anticipation, because you're absolutely right. See, at this point, you kind of confirmed yourself. I'm like, okay, that is Luke Skywalker. Now, what are you gonna look like? Are you gonna lift the hood up, or are you just gonna leave it there? What are you gonna do, Luke?
They did an amazing job. If looking very closely at it, like a fine, super fine magnifying glass eye, of course it's CGI. Of course it is. But it's very realistic CGI. And they had that technology since Rogue One when they did that to Grand Moff Tarkin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that dude was dead, the actor, Mm-hmm. And so it's possible to do it. Which, side note, and this just popped into my head, side note, that is so freaking scary that they can do that and make, with some old voice files and some old pictures, make an absolute realistic, lifelike image and sound of a person and pass it off as real enough to be believable. That's a whole scary thing in and of itself. I'm glad they did it in this movie because it helped sell it.
How did they do that? Did they have a stand-in for him and they just took his old recordings and his old face from the film? Or
I think Mark Hamill did provide the voice for it, but because he is a voice actor, so he could have easily replicated his younger self. But I'm sure they fine-tuned it a little bit. But I believe Mark Hamill did provide the voice, and there was just a standing, because obviously we didn't see his face until he was literally standing there. He wasn't doing anything, but all the action, that was somebody else.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess I have my only 2 other things I have. My one thing is, okay, in the original trilogy, when Boba Fett died, didn't they chop his head off?
No.
No, I don't think they did.
How did he die?
He fell in the Sarlacc pit.
Did he get shot? See, I thought he got... Okay. He just fell?
In Return of the Jedi, he was... Initially, he was on Jabba's sail barge with everybody else hanging out at the party.
Yeah.
Right? And then on the little side skiff, you had Luke and Han and Chewbacca and all the guard units, right? As soon as things went south on that skiff, Boba Fett jetpacks over to help out, right? And he does his little, his wrist thing where he shoots the cable at Luke and locks him up, and Luke cuts it. It was Han, and we'd have to go back and check the footage, and maybe we do that at some other point, but Han was still blind from carbonite freezing, but he had this big long staff or whatever it was that he had with him, and he turned real quick, and that staff hit the back of Boba Fett's jetpack and triggered it and launched him off uncontrolled. He hits the side of the sail barge and slides off of it into the Sarlacc pit. And I thought, I remember all that, but I also thought it was so funny because the Sarlacc burped, which I thought was hilarious because I was a little kid, and a burp is amazingly funny. So that's how he went. He didn't get shot. He got knocked into the Sarlacc pit. Anybody else, of course, is dead because that's all teeth and digestive juice. But he's wearing his Mandalorian armor, which is proof against even lightsabers.
Yeah.
And so as we saw in, I don't remember which episode it's the first episode in season 2 of Mandalorian when Timothy Oliphant is wearing Boba Fett's armor. A Sarlacc is a big vicious thing, but they're killable because a crate dragon, has killed one before. And so we know Boba Fett to be a pretty, determined character. And he's wearing this armor that the armor itself, of course, is very strong and can withstand whatever. But he is armed to the teeth. I mean, when he lands and helps fight off all of the troopers, even his kneecaps have armament on them. I mean, he knelt down and shot somebody with his kneecap guard, for crying out loud. So this dude is armed and armored to the teeth. And so I think he was able to probably kill the Sarlacc somehow and get out. Whatever the story was from the point that he fell into the Sarlacc pit and was able to climb out to when we saw Mandalorian, he lost his armor and the Jawas found it, whatever all that stuff was. Boba Fett was never killed, never even really injured. So that's how he could show back up. And that from the canon series that we're currently on and the Legends series that we're off of, that was, I guess, always a question in people's mind. Is he dead? You never found a body. He just fell into this thing. But you don't know what happened to him.
It was his dad. It was his dad who got his head cut off by Mace Windu.
Yeah.
During the Clone Wars. That's what it was.
Did you just look that up?
No, actually I didn't. I was just
okay,
I was
checking.
I was thinking, I was like, why do I remember his seeing the head with the helmet getting cut off? But it was his dad during when Mace Windu cut it off. But yes.
Yeah, that's why he was such a dick later on and didn't like Jedi at all, because as a child he watched his dad, it's him, but anyway, everybody knows that, get killed, in his eyes murdered by the Jedi. And then when you watch the Clone Wars series and you see Boba Fett as like a teenager, preteen teenager, getting all his training for fighting and how to be a bounty hunter, that's all he hung out with was, to quote many people from Star Wars, the scum of the galaxy.
Right.
So that's how he got to be the badass that he was. Is genetically he was the same as this, foundling trained by Mandalorians, and then you add in the anger, and then the influence of all the rest of the bad guys that he had to deal with growing up. So Boba Fett is legit a formidable person fighting whoever, fighting good, fighting evil, fighting a Jedi, fighting the whoever the Empire happens to be at the time. You know, and it's going to be interesting to see him as a crime boss.
Yes. I think my only other thing. Well, what were you going to say? Are you going to say something about Boba Fett?
No. You can go on.
No, well, I guess my only other thing with the series is like, is the Mandalorian? Is he in touch with the Force? I guess now he has the dark saber. Like now the saber is his. Like it's not his. So what? Because he won it in battle, right?
He's not in touch with the Force. The dark saber has nothing to do with the Force. Mandalorians had it, and they developed it. Even in the Clone Wars, I think they said like hundreds, if not thousands of years in the past, 1,000 years before that, because they were fighting with Jedi, and that's how you fought a Jedi. The Jedi, of course, have their very specific ways of getting their kyber crystals to make their lightsabers with. The Mandalorians came up with whatever their way was of making their lightsaber, which was a dark saber. It has nothing to do with the Force. They train to use that because it's a hard weapon to use. I got to thinking about this. Somebody made this point a long time ago, because I never thought about it until they made this point. The physicality of using a lightsaber would be massively different from using a regular sword, because a regular sword has weight all the way up. You know, it's like swinging a sharp baseball bat, whereas a lightsaber won't. The only weight is in the handle, is in the hilt. And so it takes more control to use that and more practice to use that, because it would be super easy to overswing it or not know where the blade is in reference to your person or anybody else, because there's nothing physically there, tangibly there to tell you where that blade is unless you're looking right at it. And so
that's a really good point.
So when anybody who is a trained lightsaber wielder is using it behind their back and doing no look whatever, they have seriously trained with this thing to know specifically where the tip of the blade is in reference to where their hand is pointing. And that comes down to part of that. The Force makes part of that easier, whatever. But as far as Mandalorians go, they don't have the Force. They're not training in that way. So the darksaber is not tied to the Force in that sense. So the Mandalorian having it creates his own problems for him, and
yes.
the other Mandalorian who wants it, because he can't just give it to her, of course. But
well, I mean, he could, but she's not accepting it because she's kind of more or less stubborn in her own traditions. Like, it needs to be won in battle, and that was the whole reason why Moff Gideon knew that in the first place, and was like, the fact that you want it is going to cause even more problems between you two, and as a villain, that's what I'm here for. So maybe you guys might kill each other in the process, and I win the day. My scheme is working. Which, even talking about Moff Gideon, I kind of gave him a little bit of my reserve on him, because he didn't really do much in season 1, and he was kind of lurking in the background in season 2. But when he came in. So like I was happy with Giancarlo Esposito's performance.
Giancarlo,
yeah. I was happy with his performance, and I was, as much as I was holding my reserve on it, I was happy what turned out, and it looks like he's continuing. And even it could be in the show, Ernesto, you're referring to, is Rangers of the New Republic, and he might be in with Cara Dune, which is Gina Carano. I believe that she's in that series as well, so that storyline could be moved over. But also, I remember I was talking about this earlier, that I had like my reserve for the whole season to begin with. I was like, we started off kind of not slow, but like I enjoyed each episode for what they were, but we weren't getting anywhere. And I didn't even see Moff Gideon in the beginning either. And the poster is showing all these characters, but we haven't even seen any of them either. We're like in episode 3 or 4, so what's going on? And so I feel like the beginning of the series felt like that we were just telling these little stories to get to eventually the main plot line, which was my worry. But as soon as we basically got to Ahsoka, which I agree with you was an amazing episode, we eventually got to where we were actively telling the story that we wanted to tell, and ultimately end up being a really satisfying way to tell this season. Scott, where did how was your journey through The Mandalorian? Did you kind of enjoy it through and through?
I did. With what you just described, I think maybe I disagree with you a little bit on our interpretation of how they did the season. Mm-hmm. For me, and they did the same thing in season 1. Every episode was, to a certain degree, a standalone episode. He had to achieve a thing. You met a character. He did a goal to move forward.
Yes.
So like in season 2, episode 1, that was a hugely pivotal episode, not just because of the start of the season, but you see Boba Fett's armor. You see Boba Fett at the end, and you go, okay, this is a thing happening. He has got the child, and he's still trying to track down either more of his kind to help find, the Jedi, or he's trying to track down Jedi. Either way, he's trying to do his thing. Episode 2 apparently upset a lot of people because he's on this ice planet with this, salamander woman carrying a thing full of eggs, and there's ice spiders and monsters, and I get if people look at this and go, wow, that's a disconnect, what the hell. But they did the same thing in series 1, in
season 1.
Yeah.
Season 1. Okay, maybe I shouldn't drink anymore. Words have gotten hard. So they did the same thing in season 1, where you have an episode and it's a thing that happens and it achieves a goal and you move forward. And some episodes are just that. They're bridging episodes.
Right.
In that episode, though, we were introduced to the X-Wing pilots who helped him out because they showed up later on. Mm-hmm. And we know, okay, these people carry some weight in the story somehow. And I think maybe those are the third spin-off that y'all were talking about earlier with the Rangers episodes or whatever. Maybe it's with that. So there was at least still some foreshadowing, like, okay, these people are important. In that episode, his ship got damaged horribly, and that meant he could only limp along to a certain planet, which I think was the Water World, wasn't it, where he met the Mandalorians?
Yeah, that was episode 3, and that's kind of where things slowly started to get moving a little bit.
Yeah.
I do remember a lot of people were frustrated with episode 2, mainly because we now know as Grogu, which we learned in this season, the child's real name. He was eating all the eggs.
Yeah, and again, my wife read me other people's posts about that, and they were livid. And I'm like, technically, it's a baby, it's a kid. They put shit in their mouths. Yeah. Ernesto, how many times have you had to tell your kids, take that out of your mouth? Don't put that in your mouth. Don't eat that.
Yes.
Okay, and so you got Grogu, who is, if anything, it should be a commentary on the horrible parenting skills of the Mandalorian, not the baby. The baby puts shit in their mouths. Baby knows hungry, eat.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Meanwhile, Mandalorian is trying to treat this thing as a, cognitive thinking being that you communicate with and give complex ideas to, because he's trying to get the kid to help repair his ship. No, red wire here, blue wire here, and he's frustrated the kid doesn't get it. And the kid is, Grogu is eating unfertilized eggs. These was a big canister full of eggs. Now, this could, if somebody was to watch our conversation here, this could possibly easily turn into the whole, when does, life happen? And it, deteriorates and spins off wildly into like the abortion issue. I'm not going there with that. But they're unfertilized eggs in a made-up universe, and little baby kid goes, food, and is hungry and eats the eggs because, as we all know, eggs are delicious. I personally like mine scrambled. He likes his raw like Rocky. Whatever.
Like that raw protein.
That's right. It's just protein at that point. Nobody had a problem with him eating the little baby spider eggs. He ate those too.
Yeah.
Nobody bitched about that. And so that episode to me, to me, episode 2 was not a problem. It was, well, okay, this is part of the journey we're taking. And what did we learn from this journey? One, we met X-Wing pilots. That even in the Outer Rim systems, the New Republic has a presence who is trying to do a thing. And we saw that recurring theme later on. We saw his ship gets damaged, which means he had to stop at that specific water world. If it wasn't for that, he probably would have met the other Mandalorians.
Right, yeah. Because he was also in danger at some point, because like they basically kind of, he went with some of the species that were there, and then they were trapping him, and then they kicked the child into the water, and the monster ate him, and then the Mandalorian came and saved the day after that. But yeah. That's
well, actually, he had to go to that world because that's where that salamander character needed to get to.
Yes, yeah.
So
yeah.
that
But
was the whole point of that. If it wasn't for this episode,
the male salamander had information for him to get to where maybe Jedi was. Right. So,
Yeah,
I mean, it was all part of the story, yes.
Right. And so sometimes it was just a slower way of getting there than maybe we would have liked. But sometimes that's what an episode does. You have to bridge a gap somehow, and that's how they did it. I will now then, I mentioned earlier the conversation I had with my brother years ago about all of this. It's helped me start looking at it this way. He goes, whatever they do with Star Wars, he's going to love. He decided that way early on. Whatever the storyline is, I'm going to love it because I love Star Wars. And if that's the journey they're taking me on, so be it. And that's fine. It didn't matter. Now, as long as they're not... Now, granted, he didn't read like the legend books like I have, all those novels that came out after the Return of the Jedi movie. He didn't read those. He just knows this is a Star Wars story that we're getting. So I love Star Wars. So this is what it is. Take me on this ride. I'll go on this ride with you freely, no problem. And that's how I'm approaching Mandalorian. That's not how I'm approaching some of like the trilogy movies, especially episode 8. But since we're not talking about that, I won't go there. But as far as Mandalorian goes, whatever that storyline is fine because it doesn't touch on, I'm going to call it, because I can, the Holy Trinity, which is the original trilogy,
right?
That everybody loves, and then it goes awry when you start having different interpretations of the story and what's canon, what isn't, whatever. Mandalorian is part of Star Wars because it happens in that universe, and they touch on a few of the characters as sort of roundabout way. So whatever story they want to give us for Mandalorian, I'm fine with. I don't care. If that's where they're going to go with it, cool. At a certain point, you stay on the ride or you get off.
Yeah, I think the highlight for me in this whole series was Ahsoka, and with her introduction. And Ernesto, you kind of said it was like a backdoor pilot for her. And I feel like with this, with season 2, it was a backdoor pilot for a lot of different people.
Agreed.
And they were kind of launching their, we heard all the announcements from Disney Plus of all the new Star Wars shows that are coming out. And it just feels like they were kind of just laying down the line of a bigger universe they were trying to tell. And I thought the Ahsoka episode was fantastic, especially watching her from the Clone Wars. I thought Rosie Dawson did her, that character justice. And I was very happy of how that turned out. And it's probably one of the best episodes in the series from beginning to end. Because it's also the first time we actually get to see Jedis in the series. And we see it in a way that we've never seen in a live-action Star Wars anything before. So I was really excited to see her. And I also thought that, and I kind of, again, like overall, there were some episodes that was a roundabout way of getting there. But overall, I was very happy with this. It ended up turning out to be very entertaining. Like Scott, you were saying, like, doesn't really matter what they go from here. They're not really touching, the, like you said, the Holy Trinity, and I think that's perfectly fine because there's so many other Star Wars things you can tell, stories you can tell. You don't have to dive into the Skywalker franchise. It feels like that this is the new direction of Star Wars that they need to go to in order to get the fan base back, because you're not really, you're not touching anything that people love. You're just creating new, and you can't really be mad at new because you don't know what to expect. But when, a lot of people were up in arms about the sequel trilogy, and we're not going to get into it now, but they had their issues with it. But a lot of people don't really have much of issues with The Mandalorian. And it could be because of, the child. It could be because of Dave Filoni's involvement. It could be because of John Favreau. It could be a lot of different aspects. But they're creating a new Star Wars world that I just love to continue to explore.
My only thing is that, so the main thing about season 2 is that it was a lot of backdoor pilot introducing to a lot of their different characters. So and now that Grogu's gone, he's off with Luke Skywalker. So what does that mean for the future of The Mandalorian for season 3?
I think that's a really good question for you to ask because I can go a lot of different ways. Obviously, The Mandalorian still, as of all the people who are getting their backdoor pilots, Bo-Katan and Moff Gideon didn't seem like they got there. So I think they're still going to be the main point of it. I do agree with you that without Grogu involved, you lose a certain element to The Mandalorian. And it's not like you can just bring him back. You made that decision to send him off with Luke Skywalker. So without him to go on.
No, I was going to say, it just depends. What if we come back years later and Grogu's somewhat grown? He's trained enough to maybe travel with The Mandalorian. I don't know.
I mean,
at that point, though, as slowly as Grogu ages, he's 50 and still a baby. By the time he's old enough to take care of himself and communicate the way you're suggesting, Mandalorian may be too old or dead.
That's a good point.
To do that.
I also think it's more or less a ballsy move on Disney's part to kind of all right, I think we're gonna get rid of the child, one of our most profitable merchandise item since Darth Vader and possibly R2-D2. We are gonna, get rid of this, more or less, at least that's what they're alluding to anyway, is that we're gonna, no longer feature this character in the series. And I guess that opens up The Mandalorian to do a lot more things, don't get me wrong. Obviously, he's not we're not gonna kind of, almost like Grogu kind of wrote its course, but now we're gonna tell the real Mandalorian story. Or and so I'm very curious what season 3 is going to be. When we got to the very end with the Book of Boba at the end credit scene, a lot of people speculated is this season 3? Are we just done with the that version of Mandalorian and we're using that title semicolon the Book of Boba Fett and this is season 3? But like I said later, they did confirm this is a separate series and the Mandalorian season 3 won't be coming until 2022. So it's with all these backdoor pilots, and because you got rid of a very big character in season 2, where do you go from here? Scott, where do you think they can go from here?
Well, they've got, as far as the Mandalorian himself, Din Djarin, honestly, I don't know. He was so intertwined with the story of Grogu that you couldn't have one without the other.
Right.
So what they do with him next, they can do. I think the cheap answer is they can do whatever they want, but I think that's risky because when we first met him, he was just this badass bounty hunter who would take whatever job he could just to get gas in the vehicle. The lowest paying, the scummiest, whatever he could do, he did. He took on a more noble element when he is trying to rescue the child and save it and move it to a safe space. So whatever he does, if they don't continue that nobility of the character, almost like a knighthood kind of thing, you run the risk of, I think, cheapening the character again. Theoretically, he could just go work for Boba Fett. Boba Fett will make a very good, very easily believable, ruthless crime lord.
Right.
If he feels he's good enough to step in and take over, Jabba the Hutt's gig, that was being run by Bib Fortuna, which, on a side note, that dude let himself go. Holy cow. He looked like a Hutt himself. But he's like, nope, I'm going to step in and just point blank murder this dude and then just step over his still warm, steaming, bleeding body and sit in his chair and take this over with zero challenge. He could probably do that because he is Boba Fett. Nobody, I think, has any doubt that character could do that.
Right.
Din Djarin, theoretically, could go work for him because now then you've got two Mandalorian. Is it Mandalorians? Is it Mandalori? I don't know, but you've got two of them.
Yes.
So Boba Fett then has two right-hand people that to help rule his criminal empire.
Right. Yeah. And then
that's a way to go with it. So as far as that,
no, I was gonna say that I think where they might kind of lead is kind of really kind of holding into that Darksaber storyline, and maybe there's a conflict with Bo-Katan, and you still have Moff Gideon who's alive. That's, to me, that's the only way to keep this interesting. When you lose a large part of when you lose a huge element to your story, by kind of,
and that's
and
that's the next place I was going with it. Like, so there's that. I like what you said was with the Bo-Katan thing. Sure, there's going to be that storyline. They're maybe friends is too strong of a word. They're definitely allies. I think there's frenemies. There's a definite mutual respect there between the characters. As far as a warrior role, he doesn't want to be in charge. That's not who he is. That's not his mindset. She very much wants to be in charge because she feels that's what's owed to her, and that's her genetic role in life is to be in charge and to rule Mandalore. And they've got this, stronger than stone tradition in rule that blade has to be won in combat. There is a meme that I saw somewhere that made a good point, though, is that at some point, it was episode 3, when he's talking about he's not going to take off his helmet. And she gave him a hard time for that. Yet she's not willing to accept the blade because of this other tradition. So she made fun of his tradition of not taking this off because that's how I was taught to be a Mandalorian. But as her kind of Mandalorian, she can't take the blade from him as a gift to go, I'm going to rule. So it's kind of a weird dichotomy there.
But they made it seem like the blade has some sort of power within it where like it won't even work. Almost like the Elder Wand from Harry Potter. Like it doesn't work. It has to be like you have to disarm them, otherwise it doesn't work.
You're cut off, dude.
No, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's kind of what I got from it. Like, unless you disarm him, it's not going to work. Like, what? If you hand it to her, it's not going to turn on? Like, how does that...
Right. See, I never got that. I never got that feel from it. It was just... And have you seen, Ernesto, like the Clone Wars and all the stuff with the Darksaber? The history behind it? Okay.
No.
So that, I think, is our different perspectives on what the meaning was when Moff Gideon is saying all this stuff, and she's like, I can't just accept it from you. The saber is just a piece of tech. It works no matter what. The metaphorical weight that goes along with it is what they're talking about. She can, Din Djarin go, yeah, here's the Darksaber, bye. And she can go, okay, great, thanks. But in her mind, she's not really the ruler. And the other problem is there's witnesses. Maybe if it was just her and him and nobody else, like Gideon was dead, and it was just those two in a room, and he's like, okay, yeah, here. And she's like, cool, thanks. In the back of her head, she'll know, okay, we're good to go. And she can keep that secret. And people can believe whatever they want. But there's witnesses. There's other Mandalorian witnesses who know the rules of this Darksaber.
Yeah, so, and it's funny that you mentioned like the tradition of it all, because Even with the Mandalorian, he was very adamant about not taking off his helmet, and obviously I believe it was episode the second to last episode, so episode 7. When we got back, what's his name? Bill Burr.
Bill
back
Burr.
into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
His stand-up is also very good.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's a good comedian.
He's hilarious.
But yeah, so that when he took off his mask so he can get the facial recognition and everything, that was a big deal for him because he was doing it for the child and somebody he cared for. And the fact that he at the very end when he took off his mask and was like, I want you to see me for the first time, and left it off after he left, it kind of shows that he was, after seeing what Boba Fett does and seeing what Bo-Katan does and how different Mandalorian do different things, he's like, yeah, I guess it is kind of a little bit silly to leave this on and keep this tradition going alive. So I think we're going to see a lot more Pedro Pascal in the next season with him off, with him without the mask. So it's kind of interesting that
apparently
you have
go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, with the Mandalorian, like, he is having a transition of like going away from tradition where you have Bo-Katan like sticking to hers even though she was like basically judging him for sticking to his.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I mean that's two different places that they can take the Mandalorian Din Djarin character. Is either they tack him on to Boba Fett's story, which I think he'll take on a more villainous role, which is not what people found endearing about the character, because all we've ever seen a Mandalorian to be is a vicious badass in one form or another. They can, add into the Mandalorian storyline of Bo-Katan and everybody else in that struggle, but then so many more questions come from that. What is their struggle?
Absolutely.
How do they resolve that? Somebody got to die. Either he has to die and she has a saber, or he's got to kill her and then he's still stuck as a leader of Mandalore, or Mandalore just continues to be this barren, vacant world and he's just got this cool sword now. So
Right.
Not knowing what their process is for everything, it's quite the conundrum they've got themselves into from our perspective. Maybe they're like, no, we got this. Because then at the end of the day, it's still Jon Favreau, who is extremely talented in what he does, and has been able to successfully bridge the Star Wars gaps that J.J. Abrams was not able to do.
Right, and that's a really good point. And so I'm very excited to see where season 3 kind of goes. And like even with the rest, like this kind of proved itself. Like the Mandalorian season 1 and season 2 kind of proved that like people love a good Star Wars story. It doesn't matter how you tell it. And like these other shows now have some weight to put onto it. Like there's a lot of expectations coming into these new shows. Like, all right, well, if the Mandalorian can do this, what can you do? And so I'm really excited to see what's coming up next. And kind of speaking for all of it, I think we're all saying that this was a great season. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that we are all saying that it's a really good season, and excited to see more from it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I think it's a good testament on the importance of how you treat the characters.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Moff Gideon early on, and I got to thinking about him. One of the things I liked about his character is from the first time you see him, before he opens his mouth or he says a word, and before you see his personality, this is a person high up in command. This is a person who is definitely in charge, is extremely confident in that authority, and everybody else around him is like, holy shit, this dude, don't mess with him.
Yeah.
And they stuck with that. It reminded me of the very first time you see Darth Vader. From the very first time you see Star Wars, whether it was you were old enough to see the original or if you're just old enough now to watch it, you go, wow, Vader's a badass. You don't mess with Vader. He is an evil dude. He will stop at nothing to get his way, or the Emperor's way. So the original Vader character was treated a very specific way, and they've started out with Moff Gideon in that same tone. This is a badass dude. He is well informed. He is ruthless. He is smart. He has resources. With the prequel trilogy, my biggest problem wasn't the storyline. It wasn't the heavy political nature of the story. It wasn't the massive amount of CGI that a lot of people didn't like about it. When you boil it down, my problem with those issues was season 2 and 3, the way they portrayed Anakin's character was this whiny teenager victim
Angsty
mentality. Yeah, and that's not how he was portrayed by Obi-Wan in A New Hope. From that description, he was this awesome pilot. He was an upstanding person. He was this great character. And in Clone Wars, he is not this angsty, whiny, victim-y character. In episodes 2 and 3, he is, and he's so annoying. And I think that if you watch him in the order of 1 through 6, it softens the Vader character in 4, 5, and 6 because now he was this angsty person, the psychology of what's wrong with him, blah blah blah. Like no, he's a badass.
Yeah.
And so
don't forget that part of it.
Yeah. And so I think they treated the Anakin character, the prequel characters, poorly in those movies, whereas Moff Gideon, they have established him as a badass dude, and now then going forward, he is a badass dude. As long as they don't go into some prequel mode and go, well, he's this way because, he wasn't loved as a child or whatever, then he stays this impressive, badass character to the end.
Right.
It's how you treat a character is important.
And absolutely, I totally agree with you on that because that's honestly how we are enjoying these characters now because we are connecting with the Mandalorian, we're connecting with the child, we're connecting with all of these characters that are making this rich story come together. Ernesto, what kind of your final thoughts? What your overall reaction to the series?
Well, like I was saying, I actually really enjoyed this season more than I enjoyed the first season. My only concern is what they're gonna do for season 3. Are they gonna bring in we're probably gonna explore this Darksaber sub, and maybe we'll get some glimpses into the rebuilding, into the trials and tribulations of rebuilding Mandalore. But maybe that there needs to be another Grogu level style kind of character that needs to join his journey. Like maybe he needs a new companion that he needs to get to a really big place that may require him all season, and then it's kind of like the same formula, but that's what the show is, and that's what it works. He gets his quest for the season, but he goes on little journeys every episode to get him to his eventual quest. Right. And that's what we love about it. It's kind of like that kind of like that space. And he's like a space knight, like a knight of the round table kind of Western kind of guy.
Kind of cowboy, space cowboy.
Yeah, kind of like a space cowboy. Yeah,
Batman,
pretty much. No, yeah, pretty much. But that's what we get. But I'd like to see a little bit of that, and maybe, they got to find a way to make it work. I'll be here for it either way.
Right, exactly. I think no matter what they do, when season 3 starts, we're all going to be there for it. So that's our kind of interpretation and our review on The Mandalorian season 2. Yes, Scott, you got one more thing to say?
Well, I'm super excited about the Ahsoka series because they're going to bring in Grand Admiral Thrawn. That dude is badass. From the original canon stuff that came out and then revisited in Clone Wars, that is an awesome character, and so that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know much about Thrawn, and I know they kind of explored that character in Rebels. So I haven't yet watched Rebels, but I'm going to soon, and when I do, I'll probably learn all about it, and then I'm going to get more excited for when this Ahsoka series comes out. So hopefully that's all good. But yeah, so that's our spoiler review on The Mandalorian season 2. Hey, thanks for listening to this edited version of our weekly podcast, Box Office Bingers. If you want to hear the full version of all of our episodes, which includes us discussing entertainment news, movie and TV reviews, guest interviews, and other things we've been watching, you can find us on wherever you listen to podcasts.
And if you want more from us, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And find us on our social media channels. On Instagram at boxoffice_bingers, Facebook at boxofficebingers, email at boxofficebingers@gmail.com, and Matt, we're even on the Tiki-Takis. We're on the Tiki-Takis at Box Office Bingers. Once again, thanks for listening.